Your class 1 breeding is your Dorset ewe, Jenna Marbach.
Well, good afternoon. Certainly is a pleasure to be with you all today, and really excited to get our breeding sheep show started here. We got a really nice single entry ewe that comes into it in the Dorset division here. I like that we're starting off simple, and I can say with confidence I got this class correct 100%. This one is the best one, and I really like this sheep, particularly in motion. The way she carries her head and her top line is so collected. I think that sheep's really attractive through the front third of her body. I think if we were being a little more critical on her, we could get her to stand up and settle in just a little bit better when we want to balance her off on the profile. Maybe drop her flank down in her and make her just a tad more maternal in that regard. But that's a sheep that handles with some fresh shape and really has a neat feminine kind of look there in the front third of her body. Young lady's done a nice job with her. If you would, please give her a round of applause.
First place went to Jenna Marbach, Artesia FFA. Please bring your Hampshire ewes under 1 to the show ring. Hampshire ewes under 1 to the show ring.
rear leg construction is really good in here. And then when we put our hands on the sheep and we get in behind them, I just like that one's true width and dimension all the way back into her hip and down through her leg. I like that sheep in terms of her forerib and her center body. She's not quite as bulky and dense as the one right next to her and behind her in the lineup, but I think that's the logical place to go ahead and start, particularly when we get in behind them or we put our hands on them. The one that I think sticks out like a sore thumb in terms of just body and dimension and mass and power is going to go ahead and be 2. If we can relax this ewe in terms of her spine and just make her perfectly level and a little more comfortable in motion, I could argue a switch, because I'm into that one's chest width, I'm into her body shape, and I really like just the extra mass and power that she has to offer comparatively to the sheep that come in front or behind her. She's a little shorter necked, a little more jammed up through her front end. Just want to see that sheep again relax just a shot more in terms of her spine. The 1 and 3, I think of the remaining trio, that one just gives me the highest quality looks at times. I really like that sheep's levelness and consistency down her top. We get in behind her, and I think she's wide enough in her pin set. She stays a little bit wider and squarer as we go to the ground than the 2 right behind her. And from the profile, when that one gets propped up and presented right, she can give you a really neat look as well. Relative to our class winner, I think she needs to be just a bit better at the top side of her shoulder and her neck attachment. She wants to get just a little bit deeper through the base of her chest floor. I'm okay with those parts and pieces though, because I think that sheep still has a little bit more rack shape, a little bit more freshness over her loin edge. The one coming next in 4 is really big-footed and big-featured. I like some parts and pieces of her as well. That sheep too is similar to our second place ewe in terms of her body shape and her dimension through her midrib. I like those things about her. She's a little higher performing, a little longer bodied as well. You could like those things about her and run her up if you chose to. For me, I think she needs to handle with more shape down her top. I'd like to see her a little bit better over her loin edge. I'd like to see her a little wider from behind. Young man that finishes out our top 5, that's a good look of that sheep there. She's really high performing, incredibly long bodied. I love her top line and just her levelness out through her dock as well. Got a really pretty, neat, and a feminine look to her. For me, she gets a little more forward in the angle of her shoulder and her knee. When we get right in behind her, I read her to be a little narrower through her pin set, a little flatter through the bottom part of her leg, but a sheep you really like from the side as well. A good class of them there. Congratulate all those exhibitors.
First place went to Swayze Fulmar, Artesia FFA. Second went to Colton Sandman, Cottonwood 4-H. Third went to Tegan Frost, Brush Poppers 4-H. Fourth went to Bristol Sandman, Cottonwood 4-H. And fifth went to Rat Frost, Brush Poppers 4-H.
Looking for a dealership that treats you like family and works hard to create the right deal for you? Come see us at Guy Chevrolet Company in Artesia. Family owned and operated, we take great pride in customer service and attention to every detail. From hard-working, quality pre-owned trucks and SUVs to the best selection in new GMC and Chevy models built exactly the way you want, we'll match you with the right truck and the right deal. Now is the time to buy. So hurry in to Guy Chevrolet Company on the corner of 1st and Main in Artesia or visit us at GuyChevy.com.
second ewe went to Jocelyn Fritz of Country Clovers. Under 1 went to Cage Sandman, Cottonwood 4-H. Please bring your first place greetings back to the show ring. First place greetings back to the show ring.
she's pretty complete. And I don't think that means that she's common. I think she's really good in terms of her hip and her width and dimension, extra shapely when you put your hands on her, and still from the profile. I think that's a good looking sheep. We could be an extra critical and tuck her up in her chest just a shot one, but I'm going to be honest, I don't know that we have another one out here that does that necessarily any better. The one that was second to her here, a young man has on the end, extra wide and big-footed. I love that sheep's center body. Her extra shot of power, I think, really gives her an advantage. She's still a well-balanced kind of sheep to me. I think her parts and pieces fit together. I wish we could relax her in her top line, give her just a shot more length and extension up ahead of her shoulder. Young lady that brings us the champion Suffolk here, when you really appreciate her lines and her levelness, I like that sheep again in motion. Just she stays really collected and really comfortable there in her top line. I think that sheep still has some dimension and some width from behind. Relative to a few other ones out here, to me, she's pushing a bit more maturity. I'd like to see her tucked up in her chest. I'd like to see her a little bit better handling down her top line. But things you like about all of them and all of these young ladies and this young man have done an excellent job with them. I'll go show you my two favorites. Please give them all a big round of applause as we do that.
Office Management and Technologies program at ENMU Roswell prepares you with the skills you need to succeed in today's workplace. From creating professional documents to mastering communication and administrative skills, you'll be equipped to keep any office running smoothly. You'll build clear professional communication skills, learn effective administration techniques, and gain hands-on experience with today's technology. Whether you're starting your career or leveling up your skills, this program is your path to success. Call ENMU Roswell today at 575-624-7337 or log on to roswell.enmu.edu. sizzling summer savings event is on now at Roswell Nissan. Now through the end of the month, get massive savings across the lot on an amazing...
We need your Class 1 specs to the holding area. Class 1 specs to the holding area.
Hey, good evening and welcome to the Eddy County Fair Market Land Show. I want to introduce our judge, Sierra Nauman from Mason, Texas. She and her family operate Jade Livestock, raising show steers, goats, and broken sheep. Sierra was a member of the livestock judging team at Glenn College and then earned degrees from Texas A&M and Texas Chiropractic College. She operates Jade Chiropractic and focuses much of her practice on show animals. Sierra and her husband Austin, who does our market panel earlier, have 3 boys and greatly enjoy raising them in the livestock industry. Let's give Sierra a round of applause.
back on him at times. When we get him put together properly, I like that one's balance in terms of how he still runs uphill. He's just not near as shallow through his chest, not near as long and extended as what we saw in our class winner. I do think that sheep does have an advantage right over his loin edge. It handles with a touch more freshness than what we saw in our class winner. Young lady in third has one that's got some really unique pieces. This sheep is extra shapely, really aggressive in terms of his handling quality. He too is a little tougher to show, wants to hire at times. Again though, when we get him to put together with a good look, other than being a little too tight in his top line, that sheep's still good necked, he's still shallow through his chest forward, he's really big in his upper hip and dimensional from behind. I want to lay his top line in just a shot smoother there for sure. I want to see that sheep just fit together a little bit better, but a good one there I think to be in 3. Young lady in 4 has one. I think that sheep's just really solid. She's not too out there in any one of her areas. She's wide, she's bold, and she's dimensional. She still balances pretty good. I think we give up some in terms of her presentation from the profile. Not quite as good through her neck and her chest. Not quite as impressive from just a level standpoint up front, but a good solid kind of sheep. I'm going to talk to young ladies whether over there in 5th as well. That one is wild looking from the profile. We just have quite enough upper hip, quite enough leg and dimension from behind. That sheep can certainly be over here on the front line. I just don't think there's enough extra muscle shape there. Congratulations to the whole class. Please give those kids a round of applause. Your champion, Dorset, went to Chloe Platt, Artesia 4-H. Your reserve, Dorset, went to Colton Sandman, Cottonwood 4-H. Third went to Lillian Ecase, Cottonwood 4-H. Fourth went to Bristol Sandman, Cottonwood 4-H. Fifth went to Macy Ryan, Loving FFA. Sixth went to Haley Hendricks, Artesia 4-H. Seventh went to Aislinn Abercrombie, Brush Poppers 4-H. Please bring your Class 1 specs to the show ring. Class 1 specs to the show ring. drive. That's the best one, right in behind his shoulder over his rack. He's the best in terms of his loin edge and how it hooks into the top side of his hip. I like that sheep's hide. His handling quality is excellent. Still got a balanced enough look for me. He is in no way as tall fronted or as extended up ahead of his shoulder as the sheep we have here in 2. I like the front third of this wether really well, and I think he too comes together with a really long and attractive kind of look. For me, I think he beats the sheep in 3 because he is more aggressive and more honest and more genuine in terms of his handling quality, and we get right in behind him. I love that guy's extra shot of shape. Compared to our class winner or the one right here behind him, he gets a little rounder right over the edges of his loin edge. He's not quite as perfectly filled in and perfectly smooth in that regard, but I think that's a trade-off because he does come with some extra aggressive shape up high. The one coming in 3, when we get his back down and we get him to balance like that, you can get in on that one. I love that he runs uphill to the top of his shoulder. I like that sheep's neck. For me, he still has a challenge in his underline balance, and particularly in motion. That sheep's still a little deep through his chest for. He still wants to cut up just a shot in his flank. We get him behind that wether and compare him to the 2 in front of him. There's just not as much muscle shape. There's not as much true handling quality, especially over his rack, in my opinion. That's why he stays there in 3. 4 and 5 are both good sheep. I thought this was a trade-off. Young lady with the ewe lamb in 4, we get her back down. That sheep's still balanced enough, and she's got extra chest width, extra body shape, extra handling quality relative to the one that comes in 5. She just needs to be a little bit more attractive. A little bit shorter docked would help her and make her just a little bit more appealing from the profile. Young lady in 5 has one that's got big fuzzy legs, a great neck attachment, really good and level and true down his spine. This sheep needs more loin for me. He needs more upper hip, and he needs more leg in order to move him up. But a good sheep there in the 5th spot and a good class of them. Please congratulate all these young ladies on a good job.
First place went to Keslin Hetty, Artesia 4-H. Second place went to Lillian Nikes, Cottonwood 4-H. Third went to Kaylee Shockey, Artesia FFA. Fourth went to Haley Hendricks, Artesia 4-H. Fifth went to Jocelyn Frintz, Country Clovers. Sixth went to Aislinn Abercrombie, Brush Poppers 4-H. Seventh went to Tegan Frost, Brush Poppers 4-H. And eighth went to Rayleigh Hendricks, Artesia 4-H. Please bring your Class 2 specs to the show ring. Class 2 specs to the show ring.
Another good class here of our heavyweight specs, and I think, again, a nice trio on the top end. One for me, I think, that just wins in terms of feet and leg structure and just how honest and true that one is in terms of his legs and how they bend. I like that sheep's top line. We prop him up from the side. He's certainly the best in this lineup in terms of the top side of his shoulder, his length and extension up front, and still being really shallow through his chest, having enough flank to help him balance. I wouldn't be mad if that sheep was just a tad smoother over his loin edge, had maybe just a shot more flank. I still think his expression and his touch is better than the two right behind him, and I still think his underline balance is better than the two right behind him. For me, that's a logical place to start. Another good pair of sheep here too, and of the pair, I like the young lady's handling quality here in the second place spot. I think that sheep's a bit more aggressive right over his rack. He's trimmer over his forerib, handles a touch leaner all the way through, balancing off on the side. That one's not as good in his neck attachment, how his shoulder fits on his body. He's just a little more forward in his angles than what we see in the sheep in front of him. Unfortunately, I think we have those similar problems in the sheep that lands in third, so I opt for that one in terms of his handle to go ahead and stay in two. Sheep in three's got a shot more extension. He's a little taller shouldered, he's a little longer body than the one right in front of him. To me, he's not as fresh in his handle right over his rack or in his loin edge. He too gets a little too deep in terms of his chest forward, needs to have a shot more flank to balance him better, in my opinion. And I also wish we could just redesign that one's front end, and particularly the angle of his shoulder just a bit. But a good trio of sheep, I like all three of those a good deal. Young man in 4 and 5 bring us two that are extra shapely and really heavy muscled. I thought this pair of sheep was leaner and more appropriate in terms of their condition than the trio over here on the rail of the pair. I thought the young man's weather here in 4 was just a shot better in motion. I like that sheep's levelness and just how comfortable he is in terms of his spine and his rear leg, just a bit better over the young man's weather here in 5. Sheep in 5 just needs to be a little more shapely compared to those first 3, needs to be a little leveler there in his top line. Good group of them. Please congratulate all the exhibitors.
Class 2, first place went to Madison Mancha, Artesia FFA. Second went to Jaylee Joy, Artesia FFA. Third went to Hartley Gutierrez, Artesia FFA. Fourth went to Colton Nikes, Cottonwood 4-H. Fifth went to Cage Sandman, Cottonwood 4-H. Sixth went to Trevor Hendricks, Artesia 4-H. Seventh went to Colton Sandman, Cottonwood 4-H. And eighth went to Dylan McCulley, Artesia FFA. Please bring your Class 1 black faces to the holding area. Class 1 black faces to the holding area.
Plenty a good sheep in both of our classes in our spec division here, and I'll talk them briefly out of Class 1. I thought the young lady's weather here on the front side made logical sense in that class. From a functional structure standpoint, I like that sheep quite a bit. We get him propped up from the side and get his neck pulled out of him. That one still gives you a good look, and his handle doesn't bother me at all. The squareness to his hip is really good. I thought that sheep was good and square from behind. One that's second to him, a little longer bodied, bigger outlined, a little higher off the ground. Touch is really aggressive in terms of his shape. I think that sheep needed to be better over his loin edge. He needs to be a little square out of his dock. A pair of them here out of our heavyweights, I can go back and forth between them. There's plenty of differences between the two. One on the front line that just suits me better in terms of how he moves around the ring, how he attaches his front end onto his skeleton, his shoulder angle, and his neck attachment to me are his biggest advantages. But I think that's a good pair of sheep. Young lady with the second place, extra thick and stout. I really like that guy from a 3/4 view. Just want to make him longer necked and a little more attractive in how he sets his shoulder on his body. Those heavyweights are my two favorites. These young ladies will be your champion in reserve.
Your champion spec went to Madison Mancha of Artesia FFA, and your reserve champion spec went to Jaylee Joy of Artesia FFA. Class 1 black faces to the show ring. Class 1 black faces to the show ring. Class 2 black faces to the holding area. Class 2 black faces to the holding area. We need class 2 black faces to the holding area. Class 2 black faces to the holding area. A good class of them here to get us started. I think one up front suits me well in terms of how he's built and fits together in motion. I like that that he is so wide and square up front in terms of his knee placement. We get him behind him. He's still really big in his upper hip and wide going away, but he stays a little squarer in terms of his hock and square as he goes to the ground than the one that comes right behind him. I like that sheep's forerib. I like his rack shape. We could fit together his hip loin just a shot better, but at this stage of the game, they're all pretty skinny and they're all pretty green. I have confidence all of them will kind of get a little better there. Young lady in 2 has one that's most similar in terms of type and kind. This sheep is really aggressive in his handling quality. He's really shapely, and I like his upper hip from the profile. I still think he's bolder in his forerib and a little bit better in his shoulder angle than the sheep that comes right behind him in the lineup. Relative to our class winner, I didn't think he was quite as square, quite as true in his hock placement as he goes right away from you. I wish we could make that guy just a little bit better there. Young lady in 3 brings us one I like standing still, propped up really nicely. He's very shapely again, right over his rack, good in his upper hip. He's not as dimensional in his leg as what we see in the 2 sheep in front of him. I think when I got in front of the sheep, he's not quite as wide through his chest floor, wants to come in just a shot more at his knee relative to those first 2. And in motion, I didn't think that guy was quite as laid back in his shoulder, quite as attractive in how his neck and his top of his shoulder fit together. Young lady in 4, I think this is a really intriguing kind of sheep, and I argue to switch in my brain because I think this one's extra wild looking, has really good parts and pieces. At this stage, he is the greenest of the top 5, and he needs to have just a shot more width relative to those first 3, I think, if you're going to argue to move him up. But I like that one's look, and I like that one's balance quite a bit. Young lady in 5 sticks one in here I think is really big-legged, big in her upper hip again, and I think compared to the front 3, she's similar in terms of her handling quality and just how much muscle she has. She just doesn't design it quite as good on her skeleton, not quite as neat and attractive up front. A very good class there. Congratulate all our Class 1 exhibitors. Class 1 blackface, first place went to Johanna Miller, Zia Sharpshooters. Second went to Bailey Dennison, Artesia FFA. Third went to Noel Cho, Country Clovers 4-H. Fourth went to Jenna Marbach, Artesia FFA. Fifth went to Clancy Fulmar, Cottonwood 4-H. Sixth went to Aiden Cox, Brush Poppers 4-H. Seventh went to Johanna Miller, Zia Sharpshooters, tag 51707. And eighth went to Isabel Gill, Artesia 4-H. Please bring Class 2 black faces to the show ring. Class 2 black faces to the show ring.
the stubborn one that leads the front here in this particular class. Sheep's a little bit hard to get to act right and to get a good look at, and I don't discredit the young lady. She's working hard at it, but when that sheep comes together the way that he's supposed to, I think he's a logical winner for me. I think he comes with more chest width, more forearm, and more forerib than the sheep right behind him. He's wider over his loin edge. He's squarer in his dock than the one right behind him. He just needs to show a little better and just have a little bit better attitude personally, just as we get him to go. 1 and 2, I think you really like from a tallness of shoulder and length and extension standpoint. That sheep's a little deceiving because he's so good at the top side of his shoulder, so neat and attractive from there back. I think you automatically get suckered in and think that that one's also maybe shallower chested or that his underline balance is better. And I think comparatively to the first one, I really don't know that that's true. I think that sheep is still good and still balanced in that regard, but he's really not, in my mind, at an advantage there like I initially kind of thought when he first came in. That one is very impressive though from a shape and expression standpoint. I like that one's extra dimension from behind relative to the sheep that comes here in 3. Sheep in 3rd can give you really wild looks. I like that sheep's length of his neck. I don't love his neck attachment, and I don't love that he's a little more forward in his shoulder and his knee. I think it makes it a little harder to blend the front third of his body together compared to our first 2. I think as we work back, he's good in his rack shape. He's a little narrower over his loin edge. He's a little narrower out of his upper hip compared to those first 2. A sheep that you like parts and pieces of. I didn't think he just came together with quite as much quality. Sheep in 4 at times, I could get in on this one as well. I love this one's center body. I love his hip and his rear leg specifically in motion. I think all works really, really good. This one's a little stouter. He's a little denser than the one right in front of him. He too, I think, is a little straight in his shoulder angle and in his knee, and he handles quite a bit softer to the touch than the one right in front of him. So that's the switch for me between 3 and 4. I think both those sheep are very competitive. Young man here in 5 rounds us out with the ewe lamb that's stout-bodied, really dimensional when you put your hands on her. She didn't have near as much shape and expression of muscle down the top side of her skeleton as what we see in a few other ones up here. A good class again. Please congratulate all these kids.
Class 2, first place went to Jenna Marbach, Artesia FFA. Second place went to Clansley Conklin, Artesia FFA. Third went to Kaylee Shockey, Artesia FFA. Fourth went to Annabelle Wells, Zia Sharpshooters. Fifth went to Colton Sandman, Cottonwood 4-H. Sixth went to Lindsay Coggin, Carlsbad FFA, 51717. Seventh went to Lindsay Coggin, Carlsbad FFA. And eighth went to Aislinn Abercrombie, Brush Poppers 4-H.
a good pair of sheep here in this particular class, and they're similar color. I think kind of pairs them up in your mind, but type and kind. Both these sheep are wide constructed. They're both really round and bold in their forerib. They both have extras in terms of width and muscle. I honestly just think the one that leads off wins in motion. His head carriage, his neck attachment, his chest floor stays tucked up in him just a shot better. Put our hands on him, and I think he's just a little bit more expressive to the touch than the sheep in 2. Sheep in 2 is no slouch. He's well balanced in his own right from the profile. I like that one's condition in terms of it, just how lean he is. He's still very shapely. I don't think there's just quite as much extra in terms of upper hip, depth of twist or turn to the outer portion of his leg is what we see in that first sheep. And like we talked about on our class winner, maybe just not quite as good in his neck attachment, shoulder angle, and just how elevated he stays in his chest floor, particularly when we ask him to get out and move. The sheep here in 3, I really like the back 2/3 of him. He's awesome in terms of his midrib, extra stout up high. I love that sheep's hip, how he uses his rear leg. I like all those things about him. For me, he's a little too straight fronted, a little more moderate and jammed up there relative to our first 2. I'd like to correct him in that regard. I thought he was better in his top line and a little bit freer moving on his rear leg than the young man's weather here that lands in 4. Sheep in 4 has got a good touch. I love this thing's hide. His handling quality is excellent. Young man does a great job moving that sheep around the ring, and when he collects him, I think he's maybe a shot longer necked than the sheep right in front of him, and for that reason you could argue a switch for sure. In my opinion though, he still is just a little too straight through his shoulder and in his knee. I'd like to lay him back in that angle there. Young lady that rounds out our top 5 here has one that's really rugged at the ground. He's really wide and pulled apart. I didn't think that sheep was as good in motion just because he wants to get a little too tight in his spine. He ducks his pins and stays underneath himself just a shot more than those 2 sheep right in front of him. Another good class. Please congratulate all these kids.
Class 3 black base, first place went to Chloe Platt, Artesia 4-H. Second place went to Kaylee Shockey, Artesia FFA. Third went to Kelly Jerva, Loving FFA. Fourth went to Colton Platt, Artesia 4-H. Fifth went to Cabrera Hetty, Artesia FFA. Sixth went to Tegan Frost, Brush Poppers 4-H. Seventh went to Clay Kincaid, Artesia FFA. And eighth went to Dylan McCulley, Artesia FFA.
really, I think, a high-quality lightweight division drive. And in each of those classes, we had a lot of sheep I thought were really good, and some that surfaced quite handily. As we bring him back out here, I'm not going to discuss all of them. I thought we had a pair of good ones there out of Class 1. One I really liked on the front line. I think that sheep's still very nice and has a really bright future ahead of him. Sheep that wins Class 2, we talked in class, he's just a little bit hard to show, a little hard-headed. He's done a little better out here than he did in the class. I just think there's parts and pieces about that sheep that are really intriguing. He's my speed in terms of his chest width. I love that sheep's body shape, and I like how just wide and square and yet true he is, and his shoulder, his knee, as we get him behind the livestock, the same reads true. Upper hip and pin width is awesome all the way through in terms of his depth of his twist and the outer portion of his leg. I think that sheep backed off on the side still balances well, although he's probably not just the most elite in terms of how he balances here from the profile. I like a lot of things about that one. The one that was second to him, I think maybe he is just a shot better at the top side of his shoulder, and his neck length is a bit better than our class winner. He shows a lot better for sure, and I think presents himself in his top line really consistently, and I like that handling quality on that sheep as well. I don't read his front end design to be quite as unique. I don't read him to be quite as wide through his chest and his square in his knee. I don't read him to be quite as good out of his dock as what we have in our class winner. Sheep that wins that third class hit me really hard initially, and we get him back out here. I think he hits me probably even just a little bit harder. He's elite in terms of his chest floor, how it sits in him, and just his neck and extension up front. I like that sheep in motion just as much as I do standing still, and I think that speaks to his quality of his build. We put our hands on him, and he's just awesome in terms of his hide and his handling quality. He had a shot more muscle than the one that was second to him in class, I think, all the way through. Comparative to the sheep right in front of him, I don't know if he's just quite as smooth in his loin edge and how it attaches to the front of his hip when you put your hands on him, but I think he does have the advantage in the front third of his body. My two favorites are the young ladies out of Class 2 and Class 3. Young lady out of Class 3 is going to have your champion. Young lady out of Class 2 is going to have your reserve.
Your Division I Blackface champion went to Chloe Platt, and your Division I Reserve champion went to Jenna Marbach. Class 5, black faces to the holding pen. Class 5, black faces to the holding pen.
think the first class of our middleweight division here, just a little bit tougher, I think, to put together as we get on down the line. Some parts and pieces of sheep you like and just things we need to change about them. The one that to me is just the most problem-free, and particularly in how she's built from the profile, needs to go ahead and start. I like the young lady's ewe lamb as we get her propped up from the side. Awesome in terms of her underline balance. I love that one's neck attachment. I wish when we got her in here she'd just get out and go a little bit faster, but I still read her angles to be correct. I certainly think we put our hands on her. She's the most impressive there as well. 2, 3, and 4 I think are a little bit similar in terms of type and kind. I wouldn't call any of these sheep extra sound and functional off either end of their skeleton, but they're all really, really thick, very wide, have a ton of power when you put your hands on them. To me, the young lady's sheep in 2 is the most appropriate in how he handles his hip and his rear leg, and I think we couple that with him being just a little bit more trim over his forerib and handling just a shot leaner right behind his shoulder. I like those things about that sheep, and he still, I think, props up with a pretty balanced kind of look. If we were being critical on him and comparing him to our class winner, he just needs to be a little taller fronted, a little more up fronted, needs to be a little more relaxed in the angles to his skeleton. Young lady sheep here in 3, again, extra dense, love that one's feature, love that one's balance when she gets him put together. I just got to change that one skeletally, especially how he wants to set there with his hock placement. We need to redesign that guy a little bit structurally. Similar story here, young man in 4, extra wide constructed. I thought this sheep was really unique right out of his dock, really impressive in terms of his width from behind. He gets a little too wide though. Needs to be squared up in his hock, needs to be more comfortable in his top line and out of his front end. I thought the young man's weather in 5 here and the young man's ewe lamb over there in 6 were very close. I thought that was a close pair. Sheep here I think is just more aggressive and upstanding in his rack shape, a little bit shapelier when we get right in behind him. He also needs to be redesigned in the front third of his body. Wish his neck and his shoulder just blended together a little bit better. A good class. Please congratulate all those kids.
Class 4, Blackface. First place went to Bailey Trujillo, Artesia FFA. Second went to Hartley Gutierrez, Artesia FFA. Third went to Jesslyn Joy, Cottonwood 4-H. Fourth went to Gus Conklin, Cottonwood 4-H. Fifth went to Rhett Frost, Brush Poppers 4-H. Sixth went to Ezekiel Gill, Artesia 4-H. Seventh went to Tegan Frost, Brush Poppers 4-H. 8th went to Riley England, Cottonwood 4-H, and 9th went to Bristol Sandman, Cottonwood 4-H. Class 5, black faces to the show ring. Class 5, black faces to the show ring. Class 6, black faces to the holding ring. Class 6, black faces to the holding ring.
another good class here. One on the front line, I think, starts for me again in motion. We start at the ground and just how stout and rugged that sheep is in terms of his feet and his feature. He's really opened up through his chest, big in his hip and wide and square as he goes away from you. He's by some margin the most comfortable in his front end assembly and in his top line, and the way he uses his hip and his rear leg. That sheep's still really bold in his center body. He's still got some width and dimension of muscle, but he's certainly not quite as shapely as some that we've seen today. I'd like to give that guy a little more crease, a little more aggression to his handle, but I think that sheep's just too good in terms of his spine and in terms of his quality and motion to get beat in this particular group. Sheepet comes in second. I wish this guy would just loosen up a little in his neck. He reads a little stiff neck and kind of wants to suck back on the young lady. That sheep's a little shorter bodied, a little shorter in his upper hip, doesn't reach out and drive off his rear leg quite as aggressively as what we see in our class winner, but I do think that sheep comes with an awesome handle and a good touch right in behind his shoulder. I just want to see him assemble himself just a little bit better there from the profile. Sheep here in 3, I love that one's extra length and extension. He's really, really raw. I think compared to those first 2, he's just a lot greener in terms of his loin and how he fits together down his top line. We could use an extra layer of just fat there to soften him in terms of his crease there. I wish that sheep was a little bit better in his underline ratio. I wish he was just a little bit better off either end of his skeleton in terms of how he goes, but I think 2 and 3 is a close pair. You could certainly argue a swap there. The one that comes in 4, if you like ones that are wide and opened up, you certainly like this guy, and I do too. I just want to redesign his top line. I wish we could lay it in a little bit smoother. He gets too big and coarse in his upper hip. Just doesn't fit together near as good as what we have in the first couple there. Young lady in 5 rounds us out with a really attractive, good-looking, well-built kind of sheep. He needs to have just a bit more width. He needs to have some more twist and some more shape to the outer portion of his leg if we're going to run him up any higher. But a good sheep there to finish out our top 5. Congratulations to all these exhibitors.
Class 5 black faces. First place went to Bailey Trujillo, Artesia FFA. Second place went to Cameron Conklin, Cottonwood 4-H. Third went to Madison Mantra, Artesia FFA. Fourth went to Clance Lee, Conklin, Artesia FFA. Fifth went to Tegan Frost, Brush Poppers 4-H. Sixth went to Rhett Frost, Brush Poppers 4-H, tag 78077. Seventh went to Cage Sandman, Cottonwood 4-H. Eighth went to Rhett Frost, Brush Poppers 4-H, and ninth went to Haley Hendricks, Artesia 4-H. Please bring your Class 6 black faces to the show ring. Class 6 black faces to the show ring.
class here with a little more challenge and a little more sword as we work on down the line. Again, though, I think there's a pair of them at surface that are kind of similar in type and kind. This is the pair you can get behind in terms of just pin width, dimension on a 3/4 view, and handling quality up high. I think this pair kind of matches up. Of the two of them, one of them for me is definitely better in motion, looser in his top line, better constructed in how he uses his hip, his hawk, and all the way to the ground. And that one's going to go ahead and start. I think on top of that, he too is just a little bit fresher and not quite as mature through his shoulder and his chest floor relative to the sheepin too. He's also just a shot better to me in the freshness of the edges of his loin. Sheepin second, I really like this guy standing still. Awesome in terms of his rack shape. Love that sheep's center body. His flank is still really good, and that helps him balance, I think, with a really nice, attractive kind of look. He's not as good in the front third of his body. He gets a little bit more peaked to the edges of his loin and in motion. We just got to make that guy move a little bit better for me personally. The one that comes out in 3, I like this sheep's touch. I love that one's hide. His handling quality is the next best in my opinion. I like his freshness up high relative to the two behind him. He couples that being extra long and extended, really got a good look. He's got to have more flank. He's got to have more leg to match those two up in front of him. The sheep that comes out in 4, I thought if we could square this one up just a little bit from behind and we could freshen him up in his handle, we could certainly move him up a spot or two, because when she gets him put together, I love that sheep's lines, how he runs uphill to the top of his shoulder. His underline balance is awesome. He's got some muscle, he's got some dimension, just not as fresh. He's getting a little more mature for me in terms of how he touches. I like the young man's ewe lamb that rounds us out though for just her freshness to her hide, her freshness over her loin edge. She's just not quite put together as good for me off either end of her skeleton. We need to make her just a bit taller fronted. We need to make her a little bit leveler out of her dock. A good class there. Congratulate all those kids, please.
Class 6 black faces. First place went to Aiden Cox, Brush Poppers 4-H. Second place went to Bailey Trujillo, Artesia FFA. Third went to Peyton Putman, Loving FFA. Fourth went to Catherine Heath, Brush Poppers 4-H. Fifth went to Colton Nikes, Cottonwood 4-H. Sixth went to Swayze Fulmar, Artesia FFA. Seventh went to Jesslyn Joy, Cottonwood 4-H. Eighth went to Clancy Fulmar, Cottonwood 4-H. Ninth went to Clay Kincaid, Artesia FFA. Class 7, black face to the holding pen. Class 7, black face to the holding pen.
Certainly heated up just a little bit in this particular division of middleweights. I really like all 6 of them that we have out here. Certainly think we got some quality here on the front line. I thought the young ladies ULAM that win that first class, she definitely won that class pretty handily for me. And as we get her back out here, it's funny because she won that class because in my opinion she was the best structured and the best looking. And out here of the front line, she's not the best structured anymore. I think she gets a little straighter in her front end. Her neck attachment and shoulder don't blend together quite as smooth. I still love that sheep's aggression right over her rack. I still love her pin width and her set to her hip and her hock. In motion, that sheep just needs to be a little bit taller fronted and a little bit more laid back in her angles. Standing still, I wish we could fill her in just a shot more in terms of her loin edge, but I do like that sheep a good deal. The one that wins our second class, I could watch this guy move all day. I really like this one's just build. His functionality to his skeleton is awesome. I love how he holds his head and still carries his top line correctly. He gets a little wide from behind from time to time, but that's being pretty critical on a sheep that's that good built, I think, from the profile. And he still does have a lot of ESTs in terms of chest width, body shape, and just dimension. We talked about in class, and I still think it's true, he's not the shapeliest one that we've seen all day. I wish we could make that guy just a little more honest and true in his shape right in behind his shoulder and over his loin edge, just freshen him up a little bit there. And I think relative to the sheep on either side of him, yes, he's good balance. Yes, he's got a big sappy flank in him, but to me, he's just a bit deeper through the lower third of his body than what might be ideal. I wish we could tuck him up in his chest and make him just a little more athletic in his midsection. The one that comes out of class 3, I think this sheep again is still very, very good built, and I like that one's look from the profile. I love that he drops down and runs uphill so good. Got a great neck attachment on him. He's really lean and crisp and handles awesome when you put your hands on him. He's got a little bit more shape than the sheep right in front of him, although he may not have the ESTs on a 3/4 view in terms of just his upper hip, and his outer leg may not be quite as impressive from here. I think that one's side view comes together really, really neat. He is more elevated through his chest fore. He still looks athletic and shallow and tubular through his forerib. I like those sheep a good deal, all 3 of them on the front line. Honestly, still not entirely sure which one I'm going to use. I think they're all pretty good. Give these exhibitors a big round of applause. We'll go pick you some middleweights.
Division 2 champion went to Bailey Trujillo, and your reserve champion went to Aiden Cox. Class 8 black faces to the holding pen. Class 8 black faces to the holding pen.
class here. I think one, again, that kind of surfaces for me in terms of how he's put together and just how he's built all the way through. I think this sheep is extra wide and really, really big racked. He's probably the biggest rack one we've seen all day. Even at times when he's over driving, I think that sheep still balances pretty good. We could maybe make him a shot smoother at the top side of his hip and where that just comes into his hip loin and smoothing him up just a little bit there. But in motion, I love that sheep's neck. I love his chest floor. His underline balance is good. We get on the 3/4 view or we watch these sheep go right away from us. I like that one is both wide and square. And I think in this group, that's kind of hard to find. And so I naturally kind of gravitate to that one. Young lady sheep in 2 is really good looking from the profile. He's a bit more youthful to me than the sheep right in behind him, although he's given up some in terms of extras in back shape and just not quite as wide and dimensional when we get right in behind him. I thought this sheep was a bit more appropriate in how he handles his hip and his rear leg, particularly when you get right in behind him. He's also a bit leaner right over his forerib, and I like his touch with that regard. The sheep in 3, if that one's your speed and you just really like extra wide, extra stout, really rugged ones, you could certainly slide him up a spot or 2. For me, he's got to be put together a little better. You can see he's pushing a little deeper through his chest floor. You can see when you get right in behind him, that guy just needs to go a bit square in how he uses his hock and more comfortable in his top line and really off either end. Extra stout though, love that one's handling quality as well. Sheep that comes out in 4, I had him slid up a little higher originally because I like that sheep's front third. I really like his neck attachment, the top side of his shoulder. He's still really fresh and youthful about his forerib and pretty tucked up in terms of his chest. I want to make that guy bigger in his loin edge and I want to blend him together just a little bit better from there. We get him behind the sheep as we watch those first 4 walk. That's the one that needs to be wider in from behind. He just gets a little bit too narrow as he goes to his base. Young lady's doing a good job with our 5th place weather here. That one is awesome in terms of his lines and levelness, very attractive from the side. He's appropriate in terms of how he handles from a finish perspective. For me though, we just got to have a little more sheep on a 3/4 view. He gets a little plainer in his upper hip, not quite as stout all the way through. Good class of them there. Congratulate all these kids, please.
Class 7 Blackface, first place went to Jaylee Joy, Artesia FFA. Second place went to Kaylee Shockey, Artesia FFA. Third place went to Madison Mancha, Artesia FFA. Fourth place went to Bailey Dennison, Artesia FFA. Fifth place went to Riley England, Cottonwood 4-H. Sixth place went to Trayton Wells, Zia Sharpshooters. And 7th went to Noel Cho, Country Clovers 4-H. Please bring your Class 8 black faces to the show ring. Class 8 black faces to the show ring.
certainly as we're getting up into some heavier weights and bigger classes here, sheep are pushing a little bit more condition and they're just getting a little bit more mature, which can some ways be good and some ways be not quite as good. And in this group, I think there's a pair that still surfaces. They're the ESTs in terms of muscle and dimension and all those things that we talk about. They also have some problems and come with a few tweaks we'd like to change. The differences I see between them, I thought the young lady's weather that starts, to me, I think he's a little bit shallower through the base of his chest fore. I much prefer the set and the angle to his shoulder, the way his knee lays in his front leg. I like his hip and his angle to his rear leg a shot better, and I like that sheep in motion off either end a bit better than I do the 1 and 2. Problem is, he's too tight in his spine. We can see it. She knows that she's working hard to get that kind of shown out of him as much as you can. He just needs to be relaxed there. I thought off either end we were a bit more impressive than the one that lands in second. I thought totals wise that sheep was just a little bit fresher for me in terms of his hide and his handle. Young lady's ewe lamb in 2, when we get her put together, love her top line and how she blends together. I still think that sheep's really good and tall at the top of her shoulder. She's extended and her neck attachment's good. I just want to change that one off either end from a movement perspective. She just gets a little too tight wound, a little too straight for me. We put our hands on her and I think she's got the advantage maybe in just rack shape and expression up high relative to the one right in front of her. I just didn't know if we were actually a structural improvement. Those two both have a few issues that we'd like to change. Young man in 3 lands here from just how he gets that sheep put together and consistently shown that whether not only handles good when you put your hands on him, he's still fresh enough, he's still trim, he's got significantly more shape than the one right behind him, and I think when we get that look from the side, he still runs uphill and gives you a nice attractive kind of look. He's just not near as much sheep as those 2 right in front of him. Young lady with the blue weather here, that one's just a little plainer and more nondescript in terms of his handling quality. I like that one's angles, I like that sheep's head carriage, I like his chest floor. I just want to make him more aggressive and rounder in terms of his shape. Young lady that rounds out our top 5, one you got to like from a width and mass and just ruggedness standpoint. He's pushing a bit more condition than a few of them and probably than he needs to be, but he's still really wide and dimensional, and that's what landed him over the sheep farther down the line. A good class of them. Please congratulate all these exhibitors.
Class 8 Blackface, first place went to Bailey Dennison, Artesia FFA. Second place went to Bailey Trujillo, Artesia FFA. Third went to Rhett Frost, Brush Puppers 4-H. Fourth went to Macy Ryan, Loving FFA. Fifth went to Kimber Maley, Country Clovers 4-H. Sixth went to Jack Jerva, Loving FFA. Seventh went to Colton Nikkes, Cottonwood 4-H. And eighth went to Aislinn Abercrombie, Brush Puppers 4-H. Class 9 Black Faces to the show ring. Class 9 Black Faces to the show ring.
Definitely the class we've been waiting for today in terms of just having some heavy hitters, and depth of quality in this particular group is really, really good. These young ladies have all been showing against each other all day, and they've been duking it out, and it was kind of fun to see them come back out here with their heavyweights and see which one sorts to the top. For me, I hope that you could tell within the first lap around the ring which one I was going to gravitate to, because that's been the kind I've gravitated to today. In terms of how he's built and put together, I like that one's feet and legs, and the combination of how he's built from the side with still having so much extra through his chest, his forerib, his extra up high in terms of his rack shape, really big and good in his upper hip, and that one's awesome in terms of how his hip and his rear leg work. That's a really nice sheep for this size and weight. I still think he's very trim and lean in terms of how he touches. I like that one quite a bit. He's an obvious winner for me. On through second, through down the line, I think it gets really close. It's a dogfight out here. The one that to me best suits me in terms of structure and combining that with the right kind of width, the right kind of muscle, is going to land in second. This is the best built one of the remaining group, in my opinion. We cut him loose and run him around. That's going to be the one you come back to in terms of how his feet and legs work. He's square enough when you get right in behind him. He is not the longest necked. He's not the tallest shouldered. He's not the longest bodied, but he's still really good in terms of his handle. He's not too fat, and I thought he was more genuine in his forerib and just a little better in his angles than the sheep that comes right next in the lineup. I like this Weather standing still. She gets him propped up, and you can get in on that one's top line and attractiveness. He's really neat in terms of how he connects his neck onto the top side of his blade. He too, for me, gets a little too straight fronted, just doesn't want to get out and go and use his hip and hock very well. We put our hands on him, and I thought that sheep was a little more aggressive in his shape than the one right behind him. He's a little trimmer than the one right behind him, but I didn't think he moved as good as the two sheep right in front of him today. One coming in four, he's a little bigger outlined, a little longer bodied, a little taller shouldered. I like all those things about him, and I think for his size, he's still fitting it together pretty good, but when you put your hands on him, his maturity starts to show a little more in this group. A little plainer in his handle, a little softer over his forerib. I didn't think he was a structural improvement, or I would have run him up a little higher. Young lady rounds out our top five with one I think sounder than the sheep that comes in six, just not near as much ESTs in terms of his pin width, not near as just bulky and dense in terms of his muscle and how he lays it on his skeleton, just a little bit looser in his spine, looser in his rear leg. I like that about that sheep. And then his still, for this size and weight, is again plenty trim in how he handles. Good group of them here to finish us off. Congratulate these girls. They've done a great job all day. I'm not going to try and take up too much extra time today, but as we get our heavyweights back out here, I think certainly another deep, high-quality set of them. I think there was a sticky class there in the middle. I thought that was just a little bit harder to put together, and then I thought our first class and our third class, I thought we had one at the front that you could just kind of run with in terms of type and kind. Of the pair, I think that it gets closer between young lady with the heavyweight and young lady with the lighter weight sheep. I think there's one that just hits me a little harder through his chest floor, how his shoulder sets in him, how his neck comes out is maybe just a shot better today. I like the young lady's heavyweight to be your champion. Young lady out of class 1 has your reserve.
Your Division III champion and reserve champion went to Jaylee Joy. We need all of your division winners and your Dorset and Specs back to the show ring. Your winners of the Dorset and the Specs and your division winners to the show ring.
If you've made it this far with us in the Market Lamb Show, if you would, just put your hands together for all of the exhibitors that got to come back out here. I had no idea coming into today what to expect in terms of quality, and y'all have just by far and away exceeded anything I thought I was going to see today. In each of our breeds and in divisions in the black faces, we had plenty of quality and some good ones to sort through. And more importantly, I really appreciate just the respect and the try and the drive that each of our exhibitors have presented themselves with throughout the day. I know it's not easy to get last. It's not easy to get third to last for like the third time in a row, and so a couple of kids really stood out to me today and just how gracious they were, and I really want to just call that out on you parents for doing a great job raising your kids, doing something I'm incredibly passionate about, but doing it the right way, because that's really at the end of the day what we're doing. We're trying to raise good people, and I think you certainly have that going for you here in Eddy County. Real briefly, I thought we had a good pair of Dorsets. Both of those sheep, you could kind of go back and forth. I thought the one on the front line was just really exceptional in terms of his look and still having so much extra from behind and dimension of muscle. Young man had a really nice reserve over there, just wasn't quite as good looking. Good pair of specs that come back out, a really wild looking one on the front line. You just love that one's shape and expression of muscle, and still to have that kind of balance and symmetry to him. Really like that sheep. One that was reserved to him, just not quite as extra up front, not quite as unique in how he's built through his chest for, but a good weather there nonetheless. Out of our lightweights, I thought that was a good pair of sheep. One that hit me a little harder and I think is really intriguing in the front third of his body, how he balances down his top line, the set to his hip and his hock, and still puts it together with an awesome fresh shape and really aggressive handle. I like that sheep quite a bit as we get him back out here. One that was second to him I thought was just a little bulkier everywhere, really dense, not quite as aggressive in his shape, not quite as unique in how he's built through his shoulder and through his chest, but a really nice weather there that was reserved in our lightweight division. I thought our middleweights were close, a pair of them that come back out, plenty different in terms of type and kind. Both those sheep I thought were sound and functional. One on the front line maybe gave up just a little extra shape and aggression of handle with a really bold center body, really good in motion. Thought maybe he was just a little bit deeper, not quite as just tucked up through his chest as what we saw in a few others, but I like that sheep again, especially on the move. One that was reserved to him, really good looking and attractive, just didn't have quite as much extra, I don't think, in terms of his hip and his leg when we get right in behind him. Pair of similar kind of sheep out of the heavyweights, but one on the front side here, I really liked that one as he came out in class. I like that one's feature, and just your eye gravitates to him, and then when you get to him, he's built so dang well. I really like that one's in motion. He collects himself beautifully from the profile. We get him behind the sheep, and he's equally as impressive over his rack, over his loin edge, equally as impressive right in from behind. A good pair of them there. I thought the one that was reserved, though, maybe a little softer over his forerib, maybe a little plainer in the front third of his body. Again, like I kind of said in one of them earlier, I really don't know which one we're going to go with or what'll be our reserve. I assume we're only picking two. Is that right? Okay, that makes my job easier. Thank y'all. But before I set the mic down, just want to say thank y'all for having me. It's been a super enjoyable experience, and at the end of the day, I always like to bring light to the fact, especially at county fairs, what we're doing right here is not about these sheep at all. It's all about these kids, and if the most important thing that they can learn is how to lose, that's an important thing as well. And so I always want to see winners, always like to see a gracious winner, but a gracious loser is equally as important, because life is hard sometimes, and you're going to lose at different points. And so trying to have a good attitude about it and do the best job that you can, get back out there and try again next time is just all you can do. I'm very fortunate that my family's been in this business a really long time. My great-grandmother actually started showing steers in like the 1930s. So we've been doing this multiple generations, and it is something that we really care about. And I'm not telling you I don't care about the sheep that we're going to pick, because I certainly do. But at the end of the day, for me, the most important thing that I can do as a judge is to try to reflect value in each of these young people, and I want each of them to know, whether you're out here in the Grand Drive or you got your teeth kicked in today, you're valued and Jesus loves you, and that is it. That's the most important thing right there. So if you don't learn anything else, remember that as we go throughout the day.
Hello. Your grand champion market lamb went to Jaylee Joy, and your reserve grand champion went to Chloe Platt. Please give our judge one more big round of applause for coming to Eddy County tonight.
Roswell Livestock and Farm Supply and Purina want to celebrate the true horse lovers by rewarding you and the animals that you love.
Christy made me fall in love with her, thanks to her lovable personality and her princess-like ego.
Now through July 31st, share your story and you'll be entered to win the grand prize of $300 worth of feed for your horse or one of 5 prize packages, including a Purina hat, notebook, and supplement scoop, plus products from Replenimash and more. Simply like Roswell Livestock and Farm Supply on Facebook, then share a photo and story in the comments about when you knew you were a horse person. It could be the story of your first horse, your favorite ride, or anything in between.
And I watched a baby horse come into life, and something clicked.
So, share your story and let's celebrate these moments together.
I saw him galloping, and I'm like, wow, he can actually move like that.
Roswell Livestock and Farm Supply, 1105 East 2nd, serving Southeast New Mexico for over 50 years.